Going live at the Apollo. Just sounded right. All right. We are live with Friday Faves. I am Melissa Cady, joined by my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro, on the Change Physician. And you might be seeing me on my Challenge Doctor page. I'm obviously very casual today. I just did a little walk outside. And we will be covering a little bit of what's happened this past week, our favorite things of the week, and what's coming. So you want me to share what went on this past week in the podcast world of the Change Physician, or do you want to?
Sure. No, go ahead.
So we had Dr. Mike Woo Ming of Bootstrap MD, who has a phenomenal wealth of knowledge when it comes to all kinds of things from an entrepreneurial standpoint. You'll have to check out episode 38, which released earlier this week, and you will get an idea of someone who's a physician that knows more than just medicine. Also, Dr. Scott Parazinski, who is not only a physician, he started out as a physician, but then became an astronaut, entrepreneur. You have to listen to episode 39. Very unique episode. Not very often we meet a physician who is also an astronaut. So check out those episodes. And that was our past week. And what was your favorite thing of the week, Kevin?
Mine would be 2 food items. Well, there's a couple of things that are my favorite thing of the week, but we will see how that evolves. But the ones that I was planning on for today was 2 foods that I have had, but I have somehow forgotten, and they came back into my life again this week, and it was just wonderful and glorious. Whoa. And that was smoked salmon with a bagel, capers, and red onions. And I think I've had that every day for like last week. And the other one was steel cut oats. Like steel cut oats for oatmeal is like the best thing in the world. And I was trying to figure out why I stopped eating it. And I think it was because I just don't eat breakfast anymore.
Yeah.
But we reintroduced that into the house, and I've been eating a lot of oatmeal, a lot of salmon. And
those capers just made my mouth water just saying them.
Well, as my wife was she's like, what are you going to talk about? And I'm like, well, I'm going to talk about food. And she's like, bagels? I'm like, no. It's not bagels. And she's like, salmon? I'm like, no, you can't. They're not separate. You have to put them all together in one kind of entity. And when you have that entity now of the salmon with the capers, with the onions and the cream cheese and the bagel, now I'm like, my mouth was watering again. I might have to have another one today. So those are my favorites. Those are my planned favorites, the food items. You know, last week it was the rain, weather, still kind of nice. We're going to have some mulled wine tonight, so I can't use that yet because we haven't drank it. But next week, maybe I'll use the mulled wine. But what are yours?
Well, my favorite, actually, I made a King's Ranch soup last night that was, even my husband and I both thought, I don't know how it's going to turn out. And it was actually really, really, really good.
You got to explain that. What's a King's Ranch soup?
Well, I kind of cheated. It was kind of a pre-prepared kind of set that you bought from the store. And it had onions, mushrooms. I roasted the tomatoes and the jalapenos, and then I peeled the skin and cut that up, and then placed it in a little bit of water for the broth and milk. I used a little bit of some heavy cream, so it's not like the lowest fat type soup. But then there was shredded cheese you add to it to melt into it, so you created a creamy broth, creamy type soup. And then added some chicken, and then added, what else did I add to it? You can add chips to it, but most people think of like the King's Ranch casserole with those kind of ingredients, with a whole bunch of chips kind of layer.
Heard of this thing.
What's
never
that?
Heard of it. I've never heard of this thing. Now I'm like searching. I'm like,
it's actually the King's Ranch soup. I didn't even know really could make that, but I've always heard of the King's Ranch casserole. So
is that like a Texas thing?
It must be.
Oh yeah, I guess a fun take on a classic Texas dish, King Ranch casserole.
Yeah. So we're gonna make a little extra to have even tomorrow because we had a little bit left over. So that was one of the things. The weather's been like awesome here, like 70s, 80s during the day with a little breeze and sunny and not like totally, raining or anything. So been getting a lot of good walks and walk jogs and, not like the 105-degree weather this summer. So I enjoyed that. Yeah, that was a little bit of foodie stuff and nature stuff, and there's a lot of crazy stuff going on right now that we don't have to dive into because that could take another tangent. Just a lot of uncertainty and poor behavior from some people out there. Anywho.
Yeah. Well, it's always interesting. I guess, it's kind of what is kind of fascinating to me is this, like, oh, it's taken so long. Yeah, it's taken long, but it's not like we've had. I mean, I'm trying to think about, like, okay, see, 2000, that was a clincher. I mean, we didn't know until like December. Can't remember when that was.
I can't.
That was
remember.
A long time. You can't remember that? I'll tell you the most fascinating thing that I remember.
I'm more connected now to what's going on than back then, when in the middle of medical school.
Okay. Yeah, but the 2000 election was kind of fascinating to me because I remember, you're voting and we're waiting and there's all this stuff. It was obviously a different era because we didn't have journalists. I just saw something where journalists are literally in body armor trying to cover some of these things because they've been receiving death threats, which is completely inappropriate. I don't care who you are, what your political party. Right. The fact of the matter that our journalists are wearing flak jackets to go in to report is, quite frankly, ridiculous.
Yes. Yeah.
But in 2000, we had this thing and it was crazy. I remember the lawyers are flying to Florida or whatever. And the most astounding thing at that time, I remember distinctly thinking this, was how amazing it was that in our country, in our democracy, we had this instability.
Yeah.
And we didn't have violence. We didn't have the riots in the streets. We didn't have any of that stuff. And so I'm hoping that at least in some way, shape, or form, people start remembering what this country is about.
Yes.
Because we should not be seeing what we're seeing in a lot of ways. And luckily, we haven't seen any violence, and I'm hoping there is no violence about it. But this is what a functioning democracy is supposed to do.
Yeah.
So I know I just brought a lot home to me when I was thinking about that, because I just remember I remember the 2000 election, and I voted for Gore. And I, obviously you're disappointed in the election and you're upset and you're thinking all this stuff, but it was just amazing. I was just like, what other country would you see this, where we have this crazy disputed election? It takes for so long, and yet we didn't have any violence. So I'm really hoping this particular situation occurs. Obviously it is a different era with the way, people have modeled, what has been modeled at some of the highest offices, what's appropriate behavior.
Yeah.
But we'll see. But this is supposed to be 5-day phase, not Friday round.
I know. Well, I mean, I think just to speak from a place of compassion for people and the fact that America is, supposed to be a melting pot and accepting of all people, that this is a wake-up call that there's some healing, I think, that needs to be captured and achieved in this country. Some of the things we haven't faced that have happened in this country, which we won't go into that either, but there's definitely, just a little sentence of slavery in the past is not enough to deal with our own issues that are out there. But my favorite thing is that if there's a silver lining to all this craziness, is that it is a reminder and a wake-up call to, what is democracy really about, and that significantly divided types of thought and behaviors do exist and can happen, and that I think us taking notice and recognizing that we have humans that are not all on the same page. So hopefully there's some silver lining we can take from all this craziness. But anyway,
hopefully we learn. I guess that's the thing.
Yes.
As you were talking, I was thinking about a couple things, because the themes that we've talked about in the change position so often, one of the biggest ones is awareness.
Yes.
And I really think at this moment in time, there needs to be a lot of awareness of the trauma our nation has suffered, and a lot of awareness simply of what the traumatic history of our nation.
Yeah.
You have to be able to at least listen to some of the things, rather than just to put your hands over your ears and go blah blah blah. I know everything about the history of this nation. There is a crap ton of stuff that has only been at least starting to be talked about recently. And that doesn't mean, again, just take a moment, pause, take a deep breath, and just listen for a second to some of the things that occur, that classically disenfranchised individuals. um America has got some pretty bloody and nasty historical episodes throughout its history, and it doesn't mean ignoring those episodes doesn't make us great.
Yeah.
It's understanding what occurred,
Yeah.
facing it courageously and compassionately,
Yeah.
and then using that information to change for the future. That's what makes America great. That's what makes America great. And I just hope after this we have a little bit of awareness when we start looking, well, how do we want to evolve as a country?
Yeah.
Who do we want to include? What does democracy look like? Is it for the we, or is it for the me?
Yeah.
So it'll be an interesting, I would say a couple months, but I think it's going to be years. And I mean, even for this and next electoral cycle, I think it's going to be a really interesting learning experience.
Yeah, I think the awareness is a key feature, and to pay attention to when you feel certain emotions and immediate reactions to stuff. Ask yourself why. Like, why? What is it about? Why are you responding with such angst and anger or whatever those feelings might be, and try to understand it, because nobody's really at fault for the past. It's back there, and you're not being blamed for the things, but to acknowledge just even the morality and ethics of what has happened in the past, and see it for what it is, and reevaluate what you're feeling. What is it, what's creating that within you? And sometimes it's hard to find those answers, but I think that realizing that you have this inner immediate reaction should make you think about why. And that goes for a lot of things. We've talked about cognitive dissonance a lot, and a lot of people have no awareness of that kind of phenomenon. But when things don't settle right with you, and there's usually some reason, something's not aligning. Anyway, yeah, I think there's potential for growth. And as I say, as a challenge doctor, see change within challenge. Hopefully we can change for the better within this challenge. So how about you mention what's coming up?
So what is coming up? We have
we got awesome... Eric.
Yeah, we have Eric, obviously. Dr. Eric Larson, one of our favorite people of the Paradox podcast, where he will talk about why he started podcasts. It was another physician, another podcaster. I think he started his podcast in 2015, so he's been doing it a while. So from interesting insights, and he's a neat thinker. That's the other thing. I like talking to Eric because he thinks. I obviously like people who think, and that was a super unique episode and fun, and that led us to talk to his wife, Dr. Marcy Larson, who is in another future episode, and why she started her podcast. If we're talking about trauma and things like that, just two great people, and just an absolute pleasure to talk with them. And so Eric's episode's coming up on Sunday or Monday, whenever we publish. I can't remember.
Sunday, YouTube. You'll see it probably on podcast by Monday. Yeah. And he should have today just delivered. He was the winner of the happy hour last Friday. Oh. He got his gift for attending the online happy hour. So I'm excited to see what he thinks.
Well, I hope he likes it, because I think the Change Physician gifts for the happy hours are like the coolest thing ever. But we're a little biased. On that.
Yes, and we acknowledge.
we acknowledge our biases. We were very transparent about what our biases may be.
Yes.
Second episode of next week is Dr. Peter Lehman, another wonderful person, and he's going to go into some details about how he started his direct primary care practice. And he's coming from the perspective of an established physician. So he had practiced as a family doc for 22 years, then left his group that he was a shareholder of, because he was kind of tired of the way that medicine was going, and started his DPC, his direct primary care practice. And really pretty quickly after starting that, had a lot of success with it, obviously, in his thriving in his practice and really, really loving medicine again. So it's a great episode, and is particularly useful for people who've been practicing for a while. It's kind of funny to me, anytime there's a change or there's a challenge, is we always start looking about, well, why I can't do it, right? And so, older docs are like, oh, I'm an older doc. I've been practicing, and he's not old, but he's been practicing for a little while. This is something for the new people, and how do you do this or whatever? And then the young docs are just the same. Like, well, how would I do this? I don't have an established patient population, not recognizing that there's challenges there because there's non-compete clauses. You have to really negotiate with your group about how or what they're willing to do. And that's another good reason to listen to that episode, because the way Peter negotiated with the group and the terms that he had, which were, he had kind of been, setting the seeds for a long time. He was a good member of the group. They liked him, and that obviously did something to pave the way for him. But there's just these different concerns. So wherever you are in life, what it is that you're trying to do, your brain is going to try to, if you feed it the question of, I can't do this, why can't I do this? And it's going to answer you very quickly, whether you're a new physician or an established physician. If you ask those questions and say, I can't do this, why can't I do this? It will definitely tell you answers. But that episode, if you're an older doc, should, again, not older doc, been a practicing doc, that should provide some insights on how to negotiate those travails.
Yeah. Well said.
Well, that was a kind of a babble there but
that's okay. I babble, you babble, we all babble.
I'm quite good at babbling, I think.
Me or you?
Me.
Oh.
I'm a good babbler. I knew someone many years ago, and they said this. Someone says something that sticks in your brain for the rest of your life. They said, sometimes I feel like I just am watching myself talk and I can't make myself shut up. And I'm like, that created a moment of awareness. And I think about that all the time. Like, Kevin, your mouth is still moving. It needs to stop now. It needs to stop. But
yeah. Well, we'll stop here, speaking of that. And it is 10 till 7. It is definitely towards the end of this day. But for those of you out there, again, I'm Melissa Cady, joined by my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro, with the Change Physician podcast and community. And we hope you all have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful next week. And we will catch back up with you next Friday on Friday Faves. Take care.
See you, folks.